Hello and welcome to our weekly Parshas Shiur with the commentary of the Alshich. Um, this week, once again, we're davening for that little boy. We've been davening for the last couple of weeks and dedicating the Shiur for him, Uriah Chaim ben Chana Yehudis. He should have a refuah shalema. This week, also a little change. I'm now recording this in photo booth on my Mac, simply because the picture is much better, and with my little earbud or earpod, whatever it's called, iPod, whatever it's called, the thing that you put in your ear, which costs a lot of money. Hopefully, the volume, or the sound quality is much better as well. So hopefully, we'll have a much better experience. The disadvantage is that I can't share the screen with you because it doesn't have that facility. So let's do this as an experiment. If the quality, both picture and audio, is much superior, then maybe we'll forego the fact I can't share the screen. Anyway, as a lot of people will be seeing this secondhand, they can simply pause it and get their chumash, bring it to hand, and have a look at this week's parsha, which of course is Tetze. And Tetze, the Alshich, I'll certainly be reading to you what the Alshich has to say, so that hopefully, even if you're coming to this, listening to it on your car, excuse me, as you travel along, you won't miss having the chumash in front of you. Hopefully, I'll do a good job at that. Excellent. As usual, I make the offer appeal for you to consider sponsoring the Shiur for somebody who's not well, or to celebrate a simcha, or for the memory of somebody you loved. It's at yy@rabbiyyy.com, yy@rabbiyyy.com, which takes us right to the beginning of the Shiur. Now, it's interesting that Gitetze always appears in the run up to Rosh HaShanah. It's fundamental message, and we've talked about this before. The theme of the Parshas, or parts of the themes of the Parshas, always interface or intersect with the time of the year that we're in. And of course, this is Elul. This is the approach to Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Hadin. One would expect that the message of the Parsha is matim, as they say in Hebrew, fits. It dovetails with the theme of Elul and Teshuvah. And we'll see exactly that it does, although a first glance at the psukim would tend to suggest it's talking about something completely different. And it would seem to be a violation of the rule I've just outlined. But let me just read to you what the 2 or 3 psukim the Alshich is going to analyze. We'll do as usual, we'll go through and look at the questions that he asks. I think he might ask 8 questions, or look at, rather, the 8 questions that he asks, 8 of 12. And we'll go as normal. Here we go. Says the Pasuk, when you go out to war against your enemies, and Hashem gives him into your hand, and you take captives. And of course, it's going to go on in the parsha to talk about the Jewish soldier who takes a non-Jewish woman captive and wants to marry her. You see, Jewish soldier, amongst the captives, a woman of outstanding beauty, whom you desire very much, and you take her as a wife. I'll read a little bit further. So then you're allowed to take her into your house. Now this is very intriguing. The Torah doesn't say this is forbidden. The Torah says that it is okay. Okay is probably the wrong word. It's allowed, as long as you follow the following 4 conditions. Take her into your house. The gilcha is rosha, so her hair has to be completely shaved off. And her nails, which were so beautifully sculpted and manicured, now have to grow long. Basira is seamless shivya be'emeleha, and the beautiful dress that she was wearing when you took her captive, more about that beautiful dress shortly, has to be taken off and replaced with some old shmata. And then Yosho v'secha, and she will dwell in your house. Obosa es aviva es imo, and she will cry for her mother and for her father, Yerach Yomim, for an entire month. Little frog in the throat. And after that, then you can marry her. Consummate the marriage, and she can be your wife. These are the psukim that we're talking about, and that's all. And it seems really to be an address to matters of warfare, collateral damage perhaps, and the aftermath thereof. But as we'll see in a second, it's really interspacing, as I said before, with the theme of El. And let's see exactly how that works. Shall we, as usual, have a look at some of the Alshich questions? This would be a good moment to pause this. If you're seeing it for the first time and joining us here for the first time, we always look at the Alshich questions, and sometimes I give you the opportunity to see if you can spot any. But I think this is 8. I think I'll just read them through. But have a look at those two psukim themselves. Maybe pause, have a look at the psukim. See if you can spot any of the Alshich question based, of course, on the basic principle, as we have outlined so many times before. Hashem's good at Hebrew. He doesn't make mistakes. So if there seems to be a mistake in the posuk, if it's in the plural, it should be in the singular. It's in the past tenses instead of the present tense. The masculine instead of the feminine. The obvious question is why. Okay, so if you've paused and now come back, let's have a look at them. Question number 1. It says, Amro ki Tetze loshen yochid. It says, when you go out to war. So it's interesting, not when you in the plural, it could be you, the plural form of you all go out to war, but it's when you, it's addressing an individual, and alovecha against your enemy or your enemies. And he says, question number 1, why is it the single? Omer ki Tetze loshen yochid, v'gam shelo omer ki tilcham of a kintasa v'machama. And it just says when you go out to war, it doesn't say and war will occur and you'll go out to war, just straight in there. There seems to be an assumption of war. It seems to be the status quo. It seems to be the situation that exists. But normally war comes and you go to war. It doesn't say that. It says you go to war. But what's the war? What happened before? How did the war happen? So it drops us straight into a war without any preparation. That's his first question and a half. 2. Omro v'nosnu loshen yochid, and Hashem gives him nosnu. Again, v'nosnu, he will give him to you as a victory. Should be he gives them to you as a victory. Again, the plural. Why is it in the singular? Then it says, Shavisa Shivi will take a captive, lo omer Shavisa oisam. And it doesn't say, and you will take them captives. That says, just again, singular, you will take a captives. But you don't know what I was saying, and you know what the rabbis have to say about that, quoting the Medrash, the Sifri, Shatasa el Akanani, and he says, because it's talking about if you find a Canaanite woman amongst other captives, because here we're talking about what's called the Mechemes Reshus. There are 2 types of wars that the Jewish people classically engaged in at the time of the Torah. One was a mitzvah to conquer the land of Israel, and therefore it's called Mechemes Mitzvah. And then there are very strict rules that apply. Which is offering these people the ability to leave and no compromise if they don't. There's an all-out war, a total war against them if they refuse. This apparently is a woman who was a Canaanite woman who was somehow or other escaped the Canaanites who fled and has reappeared amongst another people. And it's saying with her, it's talking about her. But the Alshich's a bit uncomfortable why it's in the singular. So far it's been a ping pong back and forth about why is it in the singular instead of the plural singular. Dalet, fourth question. Omer Isa, and you see, what does it mean you will see her and desire her? It should just shorten the pasuk and say, you desire a beautiful woman. Not you will see amongst the captives a beautiful woman whom you desire. It's verbose. It's too much language. And God's good at Hebrew. So why does Hashem write it in that way? What's the message that's going to be conveyed there? Question 5. Why did God command all these 4 conditions before you can actually marry this woman? It doesn't say it's forbidden, but there are 4 preconditions which are required in order to achieve a marriage with this woman that you've taken as a captive from the battlefield. Why not just say it's not allowed? And we said, of course, there were the nails growing long, the haircut off, the removal of the beautiful garment she was wearing. What's that all about? It says you're going to take her into your house, and then she will dwell in your house. Well, if you take her into your house, of course you're going to sit in your house. Where else is going to sit? She's in your house. And then he says something which is, I think, a very, very interesting observation. That's the question 7, because we're going to stop there. Omro, Obosa, and she's going to cry for a mother and for a father for a full month. So the Alshich observes very cleverly. You can say to somebody, okay, you can have this woman on condition that a month in your house before the marriage takes place elapses, and you have to cut off her hair. So you can force her to have her hair removed. You could physically force her to have her hair cut off. You can physically force her to or remove all the tools that she could use to cut her fingernails so the fingernails grow long. You can certainly remove the beautiful garment she's wearing and replace it with some old, worn garment. But how can you guarantee that she can cry for her mother and father for a month? It says she's got to cry for her mother and father in a month. That's part of the condition. How can you guarantee that? Maybe she doesn't want to cry for her mother and father. Remember, we're talking about societies, non-Jewish societies, idolatrous societies. Well, first of all, it was very common for the priest to demand your firstborn child to be burned to the gods. I mean, just consider that for a second. I mean, those of you who are watching or listening to this who've had their first child, or second or third, you will know that the joy of a first child is absolutely unparalleled, in my experience, in a person's life. There is no greater joy. It's absolutely humbling and well, all the words you can possibly can think of that express happiness, real happiness. No, you've got to get that child and burn it to the gods. I mean, these are very barbaric, appalling societies. Um, and certainly the model that I hope we all have in our mind of a happy family, a mother and a father looking after the children, caring for the children, and keeping them protected and away from all sorts of knowledge of human experience beyond their years. Well, that didn't apply then. Um, uh, I don't want to get into gory details, but child molestation was, well, there was no child molestation. It was just common societal behavior in those societies. So it could easily be. I'll tell you a story. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'll tell you a story. When I was a student at university, to supplement my income during the summer holidays, I was working in a bookshop, a non-Jewish bookshop, selling books. I like books. Um, uh, and I enjoyed that very much. There was a book that was on sale at the time with the rather embarrassing title, The Sheikh's Guide to Getting a Jewish Husband, The Non-Jewish Girl's Guide to Getting a Jewish Husband. And it was a comedy, it was a funny book, also some funny cartoons, explaining to a non-Jewish girl. It started, if I remember rightly, with the following, written by some American satirist, unsurprisingly, Jewish satirist. And the book started off by saying the following. Everybody knows that Jewish men make better husbands than non-Jewish men. On average, they earn more, they're less inclined to become alcoholics, there's less spousal abuse, and whatever the rest of the line was. Here is how to get one. And that was the funny bit of the book. And then after that, it was just teaching a non-Jewish girl all the stereotypical cartoon myths about Jewish wives and Jewish mothers, the guilt trip, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. But even though it was a funny book, there's certainly in all humor a spark of truth. And there's a spark of truth that might, I don't really have a problem with this frog, is a spark of truth which might cast a lot of light on what we're dealing with here. How can you possibly insist that she cries, sorry about this, she cries for her mother and her father for a month, maybe, as the book puts it, having been taken as a captive by a Jewish soldier, is the best thing that's ever happened to this girl in her life. She came from a home where the father was an alcoholic who used to beat her up. She was just lucky for the second child, so she wasn't burnt alive for the gods. She was perhaps sexually molested from a very early age. Horrible place. And guess what? A Jewish soldier took her to be his wife. Wow! Fabulous! Best thing could possibly happen to me. So how can you? That's not within the gift of the Jewish soldier who's taken this woman as a captive to guarantee, for the very simple reason that maybe she is overjoyed to have been taken captive. In fact, Rashi says, and now we come back to the beautiful garment I said that we would talk about, that the fact in the ancient world, the fact that they they anticipated when their soldiers went out to fight against other soldiers in a battle, it wasn't just a battle of one army against another army, as somebody called the Karamat Tzvi, Josephus Ferber says brilliantly in his book. In the ancient world, they believed that not only were there soldiers, generals, tacticians fighting against each other here on earth, they believed their gods were fighting against each other in heaven. And if you lost, if your side lost, if the Romans beat you, then you simply concluded from a non-Jewish idolatrous mindset, I suppose it's quite logical, what idiots we were to have worshipped whoever it was in the first place. We should have been worshipping Jupiter or Odin or I'm trying to remember what was the Greek god, Zeus, all these people in the first place, because they beat us. They were obviously more powerful than us. So why on earth were we not worshipping them in the first place? Um, Therefore, the conquered nation automatically took on the beliefs and the societal norms and the identity of their conqueror. And the Romans and the Greeks, I'm not sure about the Greeks, but certainly the Romans used to take in these gods, these conquered gods, and put them in their temples as minor gods, now subservient to the real gods, their gods. And so there's an interesting insight here. That is to say, according to Rashi, non-Jewish women would make themselves look as beautiful and as attractive as possible so that they would be taken captive if their husband is killed in battle. Then they want to be in the winning team, and this is a way to get on the winning team. If you make yourself look beautiful and you're wearing this Armani or Gucci, I'm assuming Gucci make gowns, I don't know, clothes to make yourself look attractive. So she might just want to be married to a Jewish soldier. So how can you guarantee that she cries? Those are the questions that the Alshich starts off with. And the Alshich, in order to answer this, says the following thing. There are two types of warfare that human beings engage in. The first type of warfare is the warfare that you find on the battlefield in any society in any given time, when two armies confront each other. And the other sort of battle, that's a spiritual battle. In the first case, in the physical battle, you don't do it. You don't win. It's not your tactics, your strategy, history is full of examples of a much smaller army defeating a much, much more powerful and larger one. Think of the Spartans defeating Xerxes' huge Persian army at the Pass of Thermopylae. 300 Spartans supposed to have been historically. They were massacred after 2 or 3 days, but they held off the Persians long enough, an army of perhaps 500,000 or maybe 1,000,000, in that narrow pass to allow the Greeks to gather their armies and defeat them, an entire army. Or the United States of America, I used to say in Vietnam, but now we could say now in Afghanistan, bearing in mind the news of this week, terrible news of this week. But history is full of much smaller armies defeating much larger armies, particularly when you're fighting for your own country on your own land and they're an invader. They don't have so much skin in the game. So basically, we believe, and we say it every morning in our davening, HaShem Ish Melchama Hashem Shemai. HaShem is a god of war, which means that he determines, that he designs who wins battles. And as I said, logic doesn't come into it. You can see very, very illogical, unexpected, irrational victories like the Taliban causing the United States Army to flee in Afghanistan. So therefore, there's two types of war. The first one, the traditional, historical ones that you read about in books, God's in charge of that. That's not really you. The second one, that is you. That's the war you fight on behalf or against your Yetzer Hara. And he quotes from the famous Scholars Lvovos, who says and tells a story, a martial of Alexander the Great's soldiers who were returning once from a major battle. In fact, a historically significant battle, a famous battle in which they had defeated a fortified city which everybody had thought, the world had thought was totally impregnable, which nobody could ever defeat. No, the joy and pride that they felt in their achievement was enormous as they came marching in column along the road, singing and undoubtedly drinking wine. And a rabbi was standing there watching them, and he shouted to a group of the soldiers as they approached, "Why are you so happy? What happened?" And they said, "Have you heard of," mentioned whatever city it was, and he said, "Yes. We destroyed it. We beat it." "Oh," said the rabbi, "is that all?" To which one of the soldiers on the captain said, "What do you mean, is that all? I thought you said you've heard of it. It was nobody could defeat that." I said, "I have heard of that, so you beat it. It's no big deal." "What do you mean? What could be a bigger deal than that?" Because that's the fight you have to fight against your Yetzer Hara. That's the fight you have to fight against your Yetzer Hara. That's a much bigger battle, a much more difficult victory to achieve. And the Alshich gives a mashal for this. He says, I want you to imagine there was a 13-year-old boy, A 13-year-old boy turns up to a massively fortified city in which there sits a king. The king is famous as having ruled for many decades. He's wise. He's fought many a battle which he has won. He's surrounded by his personal bodyguard of 600 elite soldiers. And this 13-year-old boy sits out on a rock, gazes across at this fortified city, and says, I'm going to take it single-handed. But my ambition is not to wipe out everybody in the city. My ambition is to subserviate them and their king to me, that they'll recognize me as the new king. Now, just conceive of that for a second. Well, actually, it's inconceivable. It's madness. If you heard a 13-year-old boy, if you could read his mind and he was actually saying that, you would say, you need some serious therapy, son. You're seriously sick. And yet, he says, as the Alshich, that's precisely and exactly what is going on when it comes to the second type of battle. You see, you don't have a Yetzer HaTov until you're 13 years of age if you're a boy and 12 when you're a girl. You're born, your neshama comes into a body, which is a physical body. It's controlled by your emotions. It's controlled by your Yetzer Hara. It's going to take you, 13 years of maturity before you're able to assert yourself. Your neshama is able to assert itself in confrontation to that body and that childhood, that psychology, that psyche, which is totally immersed in itself and its desires. Now, what would you think? Can you do this? It's just insane expecting a 13-year-old boy to go and conquer that city. And again, remember, the conquest of the city is not in order to kill everybody. It's in order to make them worship you. But that's the story with the Yetzer Hara. The bad things, the bad midas that we talk about, are not bad. Every character trait is neutral. It's a question of what you do with that character trait. Do you make it into a positive or do you make it into a negative? It's a choice that you deploy. That's a battle that we fight. HaShem says, everything, everything comes from me. I control everything, every battle. Chutz min yiras shamayim. Apart from the one that's the product of your freedom of choice. That's the fighting with your Yetzer Hara. And the purpose is you're not supposed to make the Yetzer Hara dead. You're supposed to make it your servant. That king sitting in the palace, this brilliant strategist who's won every battle in the world. No, you're supposed to make him yours. B'shnei Yetzerecha, as it says in the Shema, with your Yetzer Hara and your Yetzer HaTov. You're supposed to harness it to a positive good. And that's obviously, it sounds like an impossible battle to fight. Or is it an impossible battle to fight? Well, maybe not. Reish Lamed Dalet in the Alshich, and he says, Nova El Ha'inyan. And now I'll read to you the Alshich. And so with our questions in mind, with that introduction in mind, and bearing in mind that really this story of the soldier, of this young man going out to battle, is words that address the state and the time that we're in now of reconnecting with HaShem from last year when we might have strayed away a little bit. Let's hear what he has to say. Let me explain to you what this is all about. The Rebbe wants to demonstrate to the Jewish people that he's willing to go the extra mile. He's willing to go well beyond that which is required of him on behalf of the Jewish people. But in order that they should pass the test of Rosh HaShanah and not fail. Because there's a special deal going on between HaShem and the Jewish people, as we've explained very clearly. Because these two wars that we've been discussing and describing how in the Sas Ba'olam that exist in the world, the one that we said, the one between you, us, and our Yetzer Hara, and the other one with other people, wars, one kingdom against another kingdom. Well, as I said, God fights that war. But when it comes to our war, he is a kol b'dei shamayim chutz me'ir shamayim. That's entirely up to you. Everything is from heaven except fear of heaven, whether you want to win that war and be in God's side or not. Okay, therefore, you've got, therefore, to engage in that battle, to win that battle for the sake of God. You become a soldier of God's in order that you'll fight that fight that war, I suppose that'd be a navy battle, wouldn't it? Fight that war, not water, in order to bring cover to Hashem. A Jew should be bringing kavod to HaShem. There's a wonderful small sefer, one of the Chofetz Chaim's Sfarim. I have it in my hand here if you're watching this call. This is from a 4-volume called Kisei Chofetz Chaim. I mean, everybody said the Mishnah Berurah, and of course, Shiur Saloshin, Sefer Chofetz Chaim. But he wrote many, many books. One's called Lekotei Amorim. And at the end of it, the whole thing is about Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem. I'm learning now with one of my verses. And at the end, he simply brings the passage from Yeshayahu in Perek Mem Tes, which says, "V'yomer li abdi ata Yisrael." This is Hashem speaking. You are my servant, Yisrael. Asher b'cho ispaer. That through you I am made and look great. I become great through you. You are my emissary, my embassy in this world. You are the exemplar following in my footsteps that should inspire other people. That's what this chosen people thing is all about. You're supposed to copy the behavior of God that the world can see to inspire them to want to attach themselves to God. Simple as that. Now, therefore, have you done that? Have you fought that battle? I fight my battle because I'll make sure that you win your battles, the physical battles. So let's see. So he says, so if you fight that battle on behalf of me, that's great. So here in our Sedra, Hashem right at the beginning addresses the Jewish people and says, see how much I love you? See how much I want to behave towards you. I'll do my part. I'll make sure you win that battle. But you won't fulfill your part of the bargain. You won't fight your battle. Quite the opposite. When you go out to war against your enemy, not the actual battle on the battlefield that you won, that was me. But in that battlefield, the first opportunity you get to abandon me because you see this beautiful girl, boom, you take it. Now, it might have been our expectation that Hashem, well, suppose you had gone the extra mile for somebody. It could even be a family member. It might even be your children who turn around and smack you in the face and spit in your face. Chas v'shalom. Might you not be a little miffed, a little bit angry? Might you not want to wash your hands of them, have nothing to do with them? Well, of course you're not, because it's your children. Same with Hashem. B'nei b'chol Yisrael, you're my firstborn son. So you've just slapped me in the face. I've just saved you from a war. Remember, in the ancient times, you're talking about battle where it's not anonymous. There's no missile suddenly ending somebody's life in a flash. Rather, it's a battlefield with a huge army, maybe 10,000, 50,000 people in line facing another 50,000 people, and they're all waving their spears and their swords at each other, threatening effectively, making it quite clear, I'm threatening to chop pieces of your body off any second. This is not impersonal. This could be horrible. And that was the situation you're in. Now, I saved your life, and this is how you repay me. But because the relationship is a father and a son, no. I want you back. We'll see more of that in a second. Well, these two things, these two types of war, when they converge and become the same time, appear at the same time, a war against an enemy, and the war which you have to fight with your Yitzhara, and you contrast and compare my reaction, what I did, what you do, you should think we're beyond the pale. But we're not. But look how I treat you. As long as, so this is the Alshich, this is very interesting. Why is it in the singular when we said Tetze al oivecha? Tetze in the singular, not Tetzu, but Tetze, you go out in the singular. The Alshich says, as long as the Jewish people go out to war with unity, fighting as one, then that's the only condition I have to do my bit and make sure you win. As long as Jews are unified, that's the secret formula the Jewish people need in order to win. We say that in Shemona Esrei and Shabbos Mincha. Once you get that bit in your mind, in your noggin, as they used to say in England, that Hashem requires of us to manifest and feel that unity that we are designed from, and that we actually, that's our nature. That's when he guarantees our victory. And then God will give nosnu Hashem Elokecha. Nosnu is the plural. He will give them biyodecha ki yasem mida k'neged mida, because do mida k'neged mida ki b'yaskem rabim nasim ki ish echad. But if you are many, but you make yourself like one person, you're unified going out to war. Ki im hayasem oivecha, even though they're oivecha in the plural, there's lots of enemies. Shehem rabim yisna biyodecha ki ish echad. I will hand them into your hand as though there was just one person who's going to fight one. But and that's why Oivecha is Loshen Rabim. Go to your enemies, but no snow, and he'll give him into your hand. It's moved from the Oivecha, the plural, to no snow. You'll give him. Hashem will make it as though there's this one person standing against you who has no chance whatsoever. Beautiful. Now, we skip a little bit. I should incidentally point out that the idea of war being used as a metaphor for our conflict with the Yetzer Hara is not in any way new. We saw it in the end of last week's Parsha. And the end of last week's Parsha, we didn't cover this last week in our Alshich Shiur, but I'll tell you what Rabbi Dessler has to say about last week's Parsha. And there it's talking about Tetze milchama. And again, it's the exact same words, the exact same beginning. This is in chapter Kof of Shoftim. When you go to war against your enemy, you see horses and chariots, an army much greater than you. Don't be afraid. The God who took you out from Egypt will look after you now as well. When you come near to the war, now the Kohen, who is specially anointed, specially appointed to address the troops at this moment, but Debar Alam, and he will address the people and say, Omar Lehem, Shema Yisrael, listen, Jews, Atem Karevim Hayom Lamacham Alavechem. You're going out to war against your enemies. Al Yerech Labavkim. Don't be afraid. Al Tiru. Don't be scared. Al Tchwazel. Don't be terrified. Al Taretz, or all the word of terror, fear. Hashem, your God is going to be fighting for you. He's going to come with you and he's going to fight for you. Now, Rashi says an interesting thing here. There were 4 expressions, as you noticed. Don't be scared, don't be afraid, don't be terrified, don't be terrorized. Why 4 expressions? And Rashi says a tremendously interesting thing. Let me read this to you. Arba Asaras. The Kohen has to address the Jewish people 4 times about 4 different warnings or encouragements that they will require when they go out to war before they actually get to fight. And that is, Keneged Arba Devorim Shemalach Omas Isim, against the 4 strategies that the non-Jewish world deploy in battle. And that is, Magifin Betrasehem. So imagine again, as I painted the picture before, 2 armies facing off each other against across the battlefield. The first thing that apparently they did was engage in psychological warfare. They would take the swords and smash them, slap them against their shields. Now imagine 10 or 50,000 soldiers doing that. The noise must be terrifying. And as I mentioned before, they're basically saying any second now, I'm going to be taking this large, sharp piece of metal and chopping pieces of your body off. Must have been very terrifying. At that point, the Kohen says, don't be afraid of that. What else did they do? And after they've done that, then he says, they get their horses, hoofs to beat on the ground. Now imagine heavy cavalry, maybe 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 heavy horse, with their hoofs beating the ground. The earth will literally be shaking. And once again, he says, don't be afraid. The Kohen addresses that. Then, what do they do? Betzvachim, bekoil. They scream, 50,000 people screaming at you. And the last thing they do is that they blow trumpets. So all psychological warfare. Certainly the trumpet call is intimidating because, it usually heralds a charge. As a matter of interest, there's only one musical instrument which is cited in the Geneva Convention of Warfare as an instrument of psychological warfare. If I pause, can you guess which one? The Scottish bagpipes, believe it or not. And if you've ever seen pictures from Scottish soldiers in the First World War, even the Second World War, they literally marched out the trenches with a piper in front of them, blowing his bagpipes, walking in front of the troops as they're mowed down by German machine guns. But the psychological effect of a musical instrument can also be a weapon. That's what Rashi says. Rabbi Dessler in Mitzvah Milion, he says something very, very brilliant. Of course, the ultimate, he says, enemy when you go to war, what it's talking about is the Yetzer Hara, just like the Alshich has been saying here, the negative side. And he says an interesting thing. The fact there's four expressions of don't be afraid is because the Yetzer Hara's technique is always to renew himself. Once he is exposed and his techniques and his strategy to get the Jewish people has been defeated or exposed, he doesn't give up. He simply wears a new mask, wears a new badge, and just reinvents himself, and on he goes. I remember many years ago in Manchester when I was the campus rabbi there walking outside a university called Manchester Metropolitan University. And well, it wasn't those days. And there was a fellow, it was just after the fall of the Soviet Union. And there was a fellow there, sadly Jewish, with a big sort of placard, like one of these things that you see people, the end of the world is nigh, on the string and two sort of like boards hanging over his shoulders. And it said, "Communism dead? It's never been tried." I refer to this in one of my books as the solitary remaining Jewish advocate. After an ism has fallen and been revealed as being bankrupt and useless, there's always a solitary remaining Jewish advocate arguing that his particular fossil is still alive and vibrant and necessary. But that's the idea. As soon as the Yetzer Hara is exposed, he invents himself. Hellenism, socialism, communism, feminism. Think of an ism. When it falls, there's another ism that pops up. The Yetzer Hara doesn't go away. You need, therefore, to listen to the Kohen, the leader of the generation, who will spot the danger and be able to map out the strategy against it. Okay, so therefore, the Alshich, to return to our Alshich here, we said that the woman has to come into your house and she has to do four things before you can actually take this woman who you want to marry and marry her. And the Alshich says here something which I think is tremendously interesting. He says the process that allowed this young man to be ensnared and to go after this woman in the first place, he says there were four altogether. And the four he mentions are, let's see if I can find the place here. Turn over the page. Yeah, the four he mentions are, what does, maybe I'll read a little bit more to you. Now, Hashem is trying to say to you here, you had to go to war. It's a physical war, but of course there's a danger in it, and the danger was that you got grabbed. So he says, therefore, though the circumstances that caused you to be persuaded to abandon me, to spit in my face, even though I've done what I've done for you, my reaction is not, you're finished, don't want anything to do with you. I simply turn around and say, okay, you want it, fine. While at the same time working out exactly how to undo the circumstances that made you want to desert me in the first place. What were the four things that allowed you, that took you away? So he says the following thing. One, Hayasa Dover Chodesh. She was a new type of person. There's nothing more interesting, seductive in any language than the word new. New is incredibly interesting. Think of your car. Whatever model car you drive, every year they bring out a new model. It's the exact same model, actually. They say about 5 zillion improvements. But, maybe they make the bumper a little bit thinner or wider or squarer or rounder. They change the shape of the mirror a little bit. If you think about it, does it in any way actually affect the performance of the car? Very, very rarely. But it does make one simple statement. This is the new model, and Chas v'shalom, yours is the old one. In fact, in the shul I daven in, they've been doing some construction, and they put in this week, going into the base of medrash, 2 new doors, quite tall doors. And when we came into daven, it was 3 nights ago, everybody was looking astonished at these new doors. I couldn't believe it. Little kids were going in and out the door. It's been a wall before, but now they put in doors. Adults, rabbis were going in and out the door. And I thought to myself, it's a door! You've been through doors in your life before. Why is everybody going through that door? Because it's a new door. New is very attractive. The concept of new is attractive. Now, in the ancient world, we all know that tznius, dressing modestly, is a Jewish virtue. It didn't exist anywhere else. So he's now being confronted with a non-Jewish woman who's dressed in the most attractive, probably sensual manner she could possibly, in order, as we said, to attract a Jewish soldier to take her away. He's never seen anything like that before. I think the American phrase is blew his mind. So therefore, her newness was one of the factors. Number two, and then the beautiful dress that she was wearing. So first of all, she's new. You've never seen a creature like this before. Then she's dressed up, so she's dressed to kill. She's dressed to kill his Yiddishkeit. She's dressed to kill. She's wearing her most beautiful clothing, most beautiful jewelry, most beautiful makeup, etc., etc. She's enhancing her beauty as much as she possibly can. Gimel, Rosh HaShanah, there was two other factors. One was after the battlefield. I mean, again, to go back to that portrayal, not very pleasant of the battlefield. When people are lying there after a battle in puddles, lakes of blood, amputated limbs all over the place, people screaming in agony in their death throes. And he survived. This young man survived. He walks off the battlefield, maybe to a little hill nearby where the sounds of the screaming have gone, and he lies down, and he's, wow, he survived. The elation of having survived, the feelings of, you were the shalom of peace and tranquility, where people have died, and I survived. He's elated by that tranquility. And the last one, he says, is the feelings of pride. Wow, look what I did. Yeah, that's fantastic. Simchas, he's feeling full. Simchas chachaim, he's feeling rejoicing in his life. So Hashem says, those are the four factors that took you away from me? Well, fine. Let's see what we can do with that. The first thing is that she has to come into your house. The second thing is, and that's for a month. Why a month? Well, we said, because the first factor was she was new. So let's undo the newness. Instead of the girl you've never seen anything like her before, you'll see her every single day when you come down to breakfast. There she'll be there. The beautiful hair that undoubtedly she had prepared to make her look as attractive as possible, as the rabbis famously say, a hair is a woman's crowning glory. That's gone. You have to get rid of that. The hair, the nails, which are beautifully manicured and maybe got varnish on it or whatever they had in those days. No, that grows. There's a nice half moon black around it, so it's not so attractive. But then, I mean, all that can be done. Oh, the beautiful dress, of course, is replaced as well with something not so beautiful. But how can you guarantee that she's going to cry for a mother and for a father for an entire month? We said that's not within his gift, and we pointed out before. He might well, she might well consider this the greatest thing ever happened to her in her life. And the answer to that lies, which we didn't point out when we were looking at the Alshich questions, when it says you'll take her to Beisecho, to your house. At what stage in a man's life does he have a house? Not live in a house, own a house. When he's married. When he's married. And the Alshich says, and there's certainly a lot of humor here, and how can you guarantee that she's going to cry for a mother and a father? No matter how bad they were? Because your wife, your Jewish wife, is going to make her and your life such a living hell. The fact that you brought this woman into your house, that it's guaranteed she's going to cry. This is what you promised to bring me back from the battle. This is what you bring into my house. So then at the end of the process, which we didn't look at the process, and it will be imlochashatable. And if at the end of this, if you don't want to marry her, then you have to let the woman go free, etc. It's almost, you can almost see the Torah smiling at that point. But the important thing is that Hashem here, instead of turning around, having been slapped in the face by the young man, he says, no, all that, you've left me behind. All that I've done for you, and you left me behind. But what made you do that? How can I undo that? How can I reverse that process? And these are the four stages in order to do that. Now it comes to the month of Elul. How much does Hashem love us? No matter how much we have offended him and, forgive me, spat in his face in the course of the year, he'll go to the nth degree. You've let him down, and he's not let us down. Even when he has not let us down, we still let him down. I still want you back. That's a very encouraging message, I think, from the Alshich when it comes to this time of the year, when we read that story of how far and how much Hashem wants B'nai B'chari, my firstborn, the Jewish people, to come back, even if in the course of the year they've managed somehow to get lost and lose their way. I'll wish you all a wonderful Shabbos, and I shall see you again next week when we learn next week's Parsha with the commentary of the Alshich. Good Shabbos.